Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
The following Encounter episode is the first of 3 programs dealing with the sensitive issue of suicide. Throughout today's program, we'll remind you of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. To introduce today's Encounter program, here's the Reverend Mark Kimpland.
I'm your host, Mark Kimpland, the senior pastor at the Endwell United Methodist Church. A few weeks ago, the hosts of the Encounter program came together and decided to help the community during a very difficult time with the ravages and the reality of suicide. And so we decided to come together to provide a community forum that we held at the Endwell United Methodist Church on May 24th. We brought together mental health professionals, we brought together trained counselors, and what you're about to see are portions of that evening, that community event that we shared together. Our first speaker brings to this time a personal story regarding suicide. Her name is Sharon Dugard. She comes to us from New Milford, Connecticut, and she shares her story at this time.
If my story can help anyone through hope, love, or just trying to navigate all that comes with raising children during these challenging times, confusion around COVID pandemic, social media, peer pressure, or living up to unrealistic expectations, then I will find a semblance of peace this evening. My daughter Michelle died of suicide a few weeks prior to her 21st birthday, which happened to be a month after the tragedy at Sandy Hook. I know she felt overwhelmed and profoundly saddened by this event as it took place only 5 miles from our home. Looking back at her life, I'm aware that she always struggled with anxiety, which I feel was the main component of her depression. She started cutting herself in middle school, which launched our exhaustive journey of seeking counseling. Along the way, we ran into roadblocks trying to find someone she could really connect with and trust, who would accept our insurance and be willing to prescribe medications that might work for her. Her first hospitalization followed an appointment with her pediatrician, where the doctor discovered Michelle's cutting and immediately hospitalized her for a week in a rehab facility. I still vividly remember the look he gave me, imparting with his expression that this was very serious and very necessary. It was a terribly difficult thing to do for me, but I had no say. Her first attempt at suicide was during her freshman year in high school. She was in the hospital for 1 day, and I was able to bring her home after agreeing to an extensive outpatient program 3 times a week. This entailed pulling her out of school early and traveling 45 minutes to her appointments, in addition to restarting the counseling process and new therapists and new treatments. Michelle ended up graduating from high school early. She was an honor student, but school was a big stressor for her. So she did what she had to do, and she graduated as a junior. Following graduation, she went to cosmetology school, and she seemed to be doing well. She was able to wear her hair in funky styles and colors and started getting tattoos and piercings. This period deepened my experience with unconditional love as she experimented with new forms of self-expression, forcing me to examine my own acceptance of her decisions and autonomy. It was apparent to me that she was trying to demonstrate ownership of her pain externally, but internally she was critically broken. 3 days after losing someone very important to her to suicide, she made her second suicide attempt. Fortunately, someone called 911 about an unconscious female in a car seen pulled over in a semi-remote area. She was taken to the hospital, intubated, and through the caring of many nurses, we were able to keep her off the psych floor. After 4 days recovering in the hospital, she again had to go to a rehab facility. She begged me not to send her to the same place as before, and we were able to find another facility that would take insurance. It was even harder sending her away this time. During her stay there, I remember feeling hopeful when she mentioned she now understood the Serenity Prayer, and it held a lot of meaning for her. When she left the facility, she went to live with her father in the next town over, rather than returning to our home. We were worried about the potential triggers of her returning to the same bedroom where she'd learned so recently of her friend's suicide, and felt that coming back to this environment could hinder her ability to move forward. Again, she stabilized and seemed to be doing okay. She always wanted a place of her own, and she moved into her own apartment in the summer of 2012. She seemed happy on the surface, but I think she was also lonely. By then, she was working full-time at a lab. She had a strong work ethic, and everyone thought she was the greatest. She was also going to college part-time, working on getting her degree. I really thought she was going to be okay, that we all were. Why else were we given this second chance? On January 16, 2013, I received a call at work from her employer stating that she hadn't been to work in a couple of days and wasn't answering her cell phone. She had just been with me and her sister over the weekend recovering from a minor correction to a cosmetic surgery. And I only share this because why did she bother fixing it if it wasn't for the long term? I won't go into all the details of the events that followed that day. She was found in her apartment, and we were met there by a detective and a medical examiner. My heart was broken for her struggle, for her sister, and for myself. People who really knew her always described Michelle as an old soul and wise beyond her years. What they were seeing were signs and symptoms of an invisible anguish she eventually decided she couldn't carry any longer. She was loved by so many. There were so many people she could have reached out to, but unfortunately, she only reached out to one person, and they ignored her messages, not realizing they were final cries for help. That person carries enormous guilt for something they could not have known or understood at that time. But I mention this because it may have seemed to Michelle that they were ignoring her desperation when they really did not grasp the gravity of her situation. My Michelle died of suicide. She did not commit suicide, as that sounds like she committed a crime. Many describe suicide as selfish, but it's not a selfish act, rather an action taken out of utter hopelessness. We saw the signs, we actively sought counseling, and sometimes I wish for a do-over. Could I have talked more, listened more, loved her more, done more? I don't know, and I don't have the answers. She did leave a letter, and I would like to share some of the words that were written in her own hand. All the sorries in the world can't blunt the pain you're feeling. I can't believe I've done this to you, especially after having some knowledge firsthand of how it feels. But I just couldn't see any other way out for me. I've felt this way for so many years, and it never gets better or easier. You have to understand the pain I feel. I just can't anymore. It seems that every decision I make keeps burying me deeper and deeper, and that no decision is ultimately the right one. Nothing really brings me satisfaction or joy. I don't know how to be normal and just relax and have fun. I'm always stressed, even just doing nothing. It's always been my personality. Lately, I've been so tired, whether it's the weekend or during the week. I'm just tired to my bones. I'm so sorry to have done this. For so long, when I'd get to this point, I'd just think of how it would affect you, and I couldn't. I thought having my own place would free me, but it hasn't. I've considered my options, like living back home, and that doesn't fix things either. Something deep inside of me has been broken for a long time, and I can't think of a way to fix it. I can't bring myself to get up and do the things I have to do to make it. I can't go to school. I can't go to work. I'm tired, but I can't sleep. I'm exhausted, but I'm restless doing nothing. You've been there in extraordinary ways and have given me far past what was due. Mom, you especially have gone out of your way to try to help me succeed, but I just couldn't. And if you couldn't have helped me, no one could. I'm so sorry. I know this isn't fixing anything, but I don't know what else to do. I love you all so much. In closing, I want to share with you something my daughter, Melissa, wrote when she was a sophomore in college. It's after Michelle's death, and she wrote a paper. This is just a piece of it. My sister wore jawbreakers in her last few years, which are double rows of knuckle tattoos on her long, dainty fingers. The top row of her knuckles spelled strength, the bottom row serenity, not the first two words that would come to mind when the black ink caught the eye of a passerby. Her body told a very personal story of struggle and searching. Her spirituality and strong mind were illustrated everywhere you looked, if you chose to look closely enough. She used her earthly form as a canvas for the art of her delicate soul, which is exactly what she was letting the world around her get a good look at on a daily basis. As I write this down, I revel at what a shame it is that these wonderful pieces of art no longer exist, some still in the works when she passed. My mother's sister and I had formed a remarkably close relationship over the years, and the splintering of our threesome has definitely presented itself as a distinct hardship in the months since. But to solidify our bond, my mother and I went and got our own tattoos. Now we carry my sister's message and mantra of strength and serenity on our own skin.
A Mother's Story from Sharon Dugard. Before our next presenter, this reminder. Please remember that there's help for anyone thinking about suicide. It's the National Suicide Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. If it feels uncomfortable to be talking about suicide, remember what Mr. Rogers said. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. So wrote Fred Rogers. The next speaker at the Community Forum on Suicide, Resources, Prevention, and Grief is Anastasia Spiratos, a professional Christian life coach and behavioral health specialist at UHS hospitals.
I am so appreciative of the opportunity to talk with you tonight because I do believe that talking saves lives. Suicide prevention begins with having the courage to talk about it and the strength to work through it. We can reduce the stigma if we acknowledge that suicide is real, that it is happening in our community, and that it can be prevented. The key to prevention is overcoming the tragedy of suicide. It's a work in progress. And therefore, I would like to share a couple of things this evening that might help in understanding. I'd like to first inform you of some of the signs and symptoms to recognize suicidality, to give you some community resources that can help you if you've been touched with suicide in some fashion, and to direct you in what to do if you are with someone with active suicidal thoughts. Now, some people may think that suicide is just crazy thought, or only for people who have a mental illness. That the idea of suicide could never really happen to somebody I know or something that's in my mind. But I suspect that you or someone you know may have actually had a thought of suicide at least once in their lives. How many of you might have contemplated the idea of no longer living just sounds appealing? Have you ever thought to yourself, oh my God, if I have to endure this, please, Lord, just take this from me? Have there been times, especially when faced with difficulties, that led you to fantasize about the idea of escaping, as if you don't have the ability to cope or endure with this any longer? Some may have this feeling of impossible or doomed, as if nothing's ever going to get better. This sense of hopelessness is real intense, for somebody who is actually suicidal. Their view of the world is distorted, and by either a devastating event or some horrible news. A fleeting thought of wanting to escape or a very specified plan of not wanting to live anymore are different ideas of suicide. Both are important to recognize, to validate, and to seek support and help with. People are not crazy who have a thought of suicide. They are dealing with something that in the moment, they cannot see another way out. Suicide seems to be the solution in that situation. But if we take the time to talk, take the time to really listen to where they're at that moment, what they're really feeling, we have a chance to make a difference. Noticing signs of depression, like being isolated, or hiding in your room, or not being outgoing or socializing as much, not taking care of yourself, not showering or getting dressed or doing your hair, losing weight or maybe eating a little too much, being apathetic as if nothing ever really matters and it doesn't really care anymore, or indecisive, the inability to make a decision because they can't seem to focus or they can't seem to concentrate. These are symptoms and ideas of depression. And if you begin with noticing some of these symptoms and address them, for example, saying something like, I've noticed you're losing some weight. You're not eating as much. I'm worried about you. Is everything all right? Or saying something like, you haven't been around lately, and I wanted to take this moment to see how you're doing. Offering insight or assuming how they might feel can be helpful. Saying something like, it must be lonely without such and such. How are you getting on? These questions validate their feelings. It allows the permission to have them feel that way, and it gives the opening that it's okay not to be okay. And just being there in that moment, helping them through that temporary feeling, is the beginning of the healing process. I tell patients that I've seen that feelings are like butterflies. They swoop in, they fly around, they hover for a little while, and then they fly off. If we can sit with them, walk with them a mile in their shoes, we can offer help. We can offer hope. We can offer support. If we ignore the signs, if we are blind to what we see, and if we are mute in not talking about what we see, we are actually permitting that it's okay not to seek out help and support. Of course, I'm not saying here that it is your fault if someone were to complete suicide. But there are things that we can do if you know someone who might be feeling suicidal. And talking about it is the first step. Knowing what to do next can really be helpful. So be willing to talk about it. Offering your time, asking how they're feeling, not judging what they're saying, or not presuming what you think they might say. Not preparing what you're going to say when they're speaking, but just being right there in that moment to listen to where they're at. Don't avoid the word suicide. You're not giving them the idea to actually carry that out. You're validating that this is something real in their mind, and that if you can talk about it, you have the courage to work through it. Don't minimize. Don't worry, it'll be okay. You'll be able to get through that, it's all right. Just acknowledge that things are difficult. Express a sense of understanding as to how they might feel. Validate them and give them some direction of where they can go for help. Let them know that they are not alone, that there are people who care, and that help is available. Other signs to take into consideration is increased use of substances, including alcohol and other drugs. Statements of suicide, giving personal things away, preparing for the idea of them actually passing. A noted change in their behavior. Expressing care and concerns for the things that you see as an invitation to talk to them is the beginning process of helping them. I'd like to talk about some community resources. Heidi McKeska is from BC Safe, Broome County Suicide Awareness for Everyone. BC Safe is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to making a difference in our community by reducing the number of suicides and suicide attempts, by increasing public awareness and providing educational training and resources in Broome County. I've had the pleasure to work with Heidi for a number of years now in many community events to achieve this goal. And together we have partnered with national organization AFSP, American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Its most public, well-known fundraiser is Out of the Darkness Walk. Its commitment to saving lives and bringing hope to those affected by suicide is the mission that facilitates these community events. I invite you to connect with BC Safe on Facebook at BC Safe Coalition. There is also a website, GoBroomeCounty.com. And if you seek BC Safe, you'll be able to obtain some additional information. The Out of the Darkness Community Walks is an annual fundraising that takes place nationwide. And it is to empower those affected by suicide and offer ways to support suicide prevention by joining together to bring healing and hope. I invite you all to participate in this community event that is held at Otsiningo Park. I do believe it is Saturday, October 1st. But if you go to the AFSP website, you'll be able to find more details in regards to that. I said that. Together, Heidi and I have for the past 4 years organized bringing together persons who have actually lost a loved one to suicide. It is a day of hope and healing to survivors of suicide. We co-partner with United Health Services and AFSP. We provide lunch, we watch a movie, we complete a creative art activity, and we accentuate our hope in overcoming. An event held on the campus of United Health Services, it is on the Saturday before Thanksgiving, to unite a group of people who suffer from the loss of a suicide by creatively remembering that loss of a loved one and sharing stories of insights and hope. Lastly, the Chalk the Walk, Have the Talk event is another community event that BC Safe promotes during September. September 10th is known as World Suicide Prevention Day. So actually in Broome County, there are a number of events that are planned to accentuate the value of having the talk, to having the courage to talk about suicide, to take a moment and meet and connect with people, to reduce the stigma. Together, we work towards spreading awareness and suicide prevention. All of these instances are community-based events that bring us all together to emphasize how necessary it is to talk about suicide, to learn the signs, to heal from the pain, to prevent the action. This is why we're all here today. Tonight's events will hopefully open the door to talk about something that many of you may never have even talked about before, may help ways to begin the conversation to heal. The above agencies that I've mentioned wholeheartedly believe, as I do, that suicide can be prevented. And the key to prevention is talking about it. It is a very scary topic. It's a very uncomfortable topic, but it is so worthy to allow seedlings of healing and growth to take place. I would like to share with you finally what to do if you know somebody who's considering suicide. To stay with them and not leave them alone. To talk with them and find a safe place. To call out and reach for help. You can call a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, or 8255. You can also text this crisis line by texting the word TALK to 741-741. You can also go to afsp.org, where there are resources in terms of what to do, what to say, how to talk about it, how to get involved. CPEP, where I come from at United Health Services, stands for a Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program. It is a program that is part of the emergency room at Binghamton General Hospital. We are part of the ER, which means we are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We provide psychiatric assessments, complete interventions, and potentially hospitalized patients that are who are in need of acute care and services due to psychiatric crisis. Suicidality is one of the main causes for psychiatric hospitalization. And should you have no other recourse or need information as to what to do if someone you know is actively suicidal, I advise you to call 911. Help from a local police department to intervene immediately and transport patients to the emergency room for assessment if someone you know has actually attempted suicide. If you have questions and you need directions, you are welcome to call the CPEP Crisis Hotline, 607-762-2302. 762-2302.
Speaking at a community forum in May, a forum entitled, What Next? Suicide, Resources, Prevention, and Grief. That was Anastasia Spiratus, a behavior health specialist at UHS Hospitals. Part 2 of this series will air next week on Encounter. Now again, here's Mark Kempland.
Friends, it is our hope that this time together today has been a blessing and will continue to bless you and bless others. Please help us spread the word that people are not alone, that resources are available regarding suicide. So if you find yourself in that space or in that place, or you know others that are, please reach out to them. And I also would like to say that you can visit the Endwell UMC YouTube channel to see the entire community event. May God bless this journey we take together.